or different is dangerous. With this in mind, would you say that investigation into the creative process, how we can encourage this sort of thing, how does it happen, what's the atmosphere in which it moves? Investigation into this is very, very much in order. You say, how would you define creativity? In America, we are very, very fortunate. We have a group of businessmen, we have a group of scientists who are studying this problem today. Dr. Guilford at the University of Southern California, Ross Mooney at Ohio State, Professor Robert Crawford at the University of Nebraska, Benton Underwood at Northwestern University, and Robert Galvin, Vice President of Motorola, and Walter Johnson at American Airlines. These men are interested in this today. And may I give you the definition of the man to whom we are all indebted for the services he has rendered in bringing this kind of thinking into our life. Alex Osborne of the advertising agency Batten, Barton, Durston, and Osborne, a great man, has a number of books. One of them is Applied Imagination. His definition of creativity is this: creativity is the rearrangement of past experience into new combinations. What does this say? This says that we can all be creative. Professor Robert Crawford of the University of Nebraska, he says, and this, if I may, is one that we could all focus on. Creativity is observation with application. We can all have them. Who's going to sell them? Dr. Carl Rogers at the University of Chicago has another definition. He says creativity is a process which is the rearrangement of past experience conditioned by the individual and the circumstances, atmosphere, and so on and so forth in which he moves. This brings us into a tremendous observation. Notice what this says, in essence. This says that you can't say he is more creative than she is, or this is more creative than that. Madame Curie, the day she discovered radium, in her diary, what takes up the first 5 or 6 lines? Her discovery of radium, and she did know what she was discovering. No, her baby had a new tooth. To her contribution that day, the thing that interested her. You see the difference there? Maybe Einstein is developing a theory of relativity that's important to society. But you and I who are going home that night, what's important to us? The cake, the frosting that maybe our wives have put on this new cake, or a new kind of sauce for meat. So you can't say this is more creative than that. Notice also, you can't say this is good creativity, this is bad creativity. Why? Because the social values of the times determine what's good and what's bad. An example. Say one scientist or one businessman or one military individual or one civilian is devising a new product to alleviate pain. Another person is devising a way to torture people. Under our present society, the guy who's devising the pain-relieving ingredient will be the most valuable. But what happens if we're at war with a foreign power? Then if this man can devise a torture that gets from the captives a military secret that saves our lives, this is a great creative product. So now we have a concept, we have some definitions, we say you can't say it's more or less, we say that anyone can be creative. This is the point that you are interested in. You say, what is creativity? What determines it? Is it age? Is it sex? Is it training? Is it education? Is it wealth? Is it intelligence? We can't say exactly no to all of these, but we could give you many examples, many case histories. For example, Edison. Edison only went to school till he was 7. The teachers thought he was ignorant. He didn't get to go to school anymore. What about intelligence? Dr. Guilford at the University of Southern California is finding that intelligence may not be related at all to creativity. It may be related a whole lot. But remember, there is some doubt in the scientists' minds of what intelligence really is. Anyone can be creative. Is it wealth? Is it health? Looking back into the lives of the people who have contributed to our society, it certainly is not health. The great contributors, many of them were victims of epilepsy, of tuberculosis. There is no limit to this. You question that. That's reasonable. Look at it then from your standpoint. Agree with us, if you will, that anyone can be creative. And then maybe we can give you something to work on in terms of what is creativity. What is it today? What is it in you, in all of us? We might start by saying that creativity is a kind of attitude. It's a recognition of the fact, those that have had a lot of logic and so forth, that there are two kinds of thinking, perhaps. There's the creative approach, and then there is the judicial approach. Now, in outlining this concept, recognize that we're not saying throw away the judicial. We're saying combine the judicial with the creative in this manner. In judicial thinking, by definition, we are fairly specific. For example, if we're filling a railway car with wheat, our problem then is how to better fill a railway car with wheat. And you see how we have limited it by our definition. The approach, very often, is that we follow regular formulas and past experience in solving the problem. Also, in the evaluation, we evaluate it item by item. We say, for example, maybe we could fill that by taking off one of the doors. That won't work. Well, how then might it work? This is the judicial approach. Notice how the scientist, how the businessman who is creative, combines this judicial with a creative approach. In the first place, when he sets up his definition, he's quite general in the way he sets it up. Back to the wheat example, he says, for example, we're going to fill a railroad car with wheat, but let's just make it very general. And how would you fill anything? Well, you could fill it with a tube. You could remove the sides altogether. Do you notice this difference in the approach? May I give you another one? A mousetrap. This man manufactures mousetraps, and he says to one of his research men, he says, let's build a better mousetrap, Joe. What kind of a limitation has he put on it by mousetraps? He says by that inference that the only way you can kill mice is with a trap. Rather, the creative individual says what? Joe, let's find a better way to kill mice. Well, that's a little bit different. Joe says, well, we could starve them to death, we could hit them in the head with a club, we could scare them to death, we could take them away from their families, and so on and so forth. You see, there are many, many possibilities. Now that we're at that level, may I give you a very, very practical one. The Studebaker Corporation has a problem fastening chromium strips to their fenders. Now, the problem may very realistically come up, how can we better fasten these to the fenders? The judicial approach, that would be the statement of the problem. The creative approach, rather, they'd say, how can we fasten anything? The grippers that the little children use on their overalls may be the solution. But think of, just in your own mind for about 2 seconds, what are some of the ways that you could think of to fasten, and then leave it to the ingenuity of the engineer to figure it out in fastening it to his Studebaker. Next, notice in the approach here, we cross fields and we try anything. Kettering, who many think is the greatest, and I agree with him in this, I've tried to get the man to speak at a number of occasions, greatest inventor we have today. This man crossed fields, relayed everything else. Whenever he was looking for gasoline that would give more mileage, what did he find? He found the ethyl compound. So you see, cross fields, try anything. Get in the, if you will, the janitor, your wife, the child, so on and so forth. In the evaluation, you notice in the judicial approach, we evaluate it item by item. However, in the evaluation of the creative approach, we delay that until we have a lot of possibilities. In other words, think of all of the possibilities that we possibly can, and then use our judicial thinking. This, then, is the attitude. There are many other examples. In the judicial approach, we tend to work on the 9 to 5 system. On the creative approach, Rather, we recognize an importance of discipline. For example, creativity as such can come at any moment. I like to use the example, with no other inference involved, that after 2 glasses of beer, we have the red-hot idea. And here comes a point of discipline for many of us. That idea comes in a great bloom there, and we can work on it, and that at that moment. Now, the 3rd glass of beer would remove that. The same thing happens for people who have their very good ideas in the morning, right as they get up. The men who have them at night before they go to bed and want to write them on their pad during the bed, while at their bedside. Many inventors, many top businessmen have learned by practice that this is a realistic approach. This then is the attitude. Let's look at some of the inner qualities. Creativity is broken up, you might say, into 4 possible characteristics, 4 elements. First of all, the inner qualities of the person. Now, these are things that we say by stock inheritance, not inherited directly, but things over which he has some major control. External atmosphere, these are the things, the people he works with, the job, and so on and so forth, over which can be changed relatively easily. Then we have the general social environment. These are things over which he doesn't have too much control. Then we have the use of the creative process. May I elaborate just a moment on the first one, our inner qualities. In this approach, we list 4 characteristics. Acute sensitivity. We talk about open-mindedness. We talk about experimental attitude. And we talk about self-confidence. Now, the importance of these terms to you can probably best be exemplified by the picture of the 2 baseball players. This baseball player, we'll say they're both very high-type character individuals, very valuable to the team, a lot of pep and so on and so forth. This gentleman bats 253, and he makes $20,000 a year. He's been on the team 3 years in the major leagues. This man bats 342, his batting average, and he makes $80,000 a year. Now, the immediate reaction is this man is 4 times as good as this man. And the next inference, of course, is that he gets 4 times as many hits. Notice that in this average, this man gets 1 more hit every 12 times at bat. Now, this is meaningful in terms of these characteristics, because we're talking about sensitivity and open-mindedness and so on and so forth. That isn't 4 times as great. It's just greater a little bit. It's like water. Water you can take up to 200 degrees and it's still water. But you add a few more degrees and it becomes steam. There is a change. There's a powerful exertion of force there. Let's talk about acute sensitivity. What do we mean by that, actually? We mean by this an awareness of the things around you, the area in which you move, the people that you come in contact with. You're aware of their likes, their dislikes. You just perceive the atmosphere yourself, your importance in that atmosphere, with an entirely open-minded, curious, emotionally powerful attitude. The example that I like to give in this instance is concerned with cigarettes. Mr. George Washington Hill, president of the American Tobacco Company some few years ago, took over the company, and it was relatively, we'll say, unimportant in the industry. This man made cigarettes, and yet every package of cigarettes he smoked, he went out and bought himself. Why? Because this is what he was selling. He wanted to know how the consumer felt. And one day when he went out and bought his package of cigarettes, he looked across the counter, and there was a very heavy-set lady and a very slim lady. The heavy-set lady was eating candy. The slim lady was smoking a cigarette. And there began, many of you will remember this campaign, there began the campaign, reach for a lucky instead of a sweet. This can be exemplified in many areas. The farm agriculturist who goes to his farm meetings. The man who has a problem and calls on his county agent. And that is enough. He writes to a man in Wisconsin, and he reads, we'll say, the Missouri Ruralist, or the Wallace's Farmer or something. He's continually holding himself open for these new experiences. Notice his curiosity. I like to use the story of the young man who was in school at a man's college, and his box number was 402. He became sort of curious. I wonder what the other people are like that have box 402 around the country, specifically the young ladies in the girls' colleges. So he wrote this letter, Dear Box 402, I'm a young man, 25 years old. I'm tall. I have blonde hair. I'm going to school here. I have a Ford V8. I was just wondering what kind of a young lady you were that had box 402 also. This is one of the letters he got back. Dear John, I went to school in 1896. My hair is white. I also have a Ford 1948, and so on and so forth. Should you ever get to Sweetbriar College, please come to see me. Dr. Met Glass, president of Sweetbriar College. This gentleman was holding himself open for these new experiences. I can conceive of that same young man when he goes into industry. He has a trip, we'll say, to Chicago or to Columbia, Missouri, or Kansas City. Say he's an agriculturist, and he reads in the trade press about a man who has a new concept of agriculture or plowing or something else. He's the same kind of a guy who would write a letter there. Always curious, always holding himself open for new experiences. Notice this last one in acute sensitivity, this emotion. We have to think of emotion in terms of creativity as being the ferment. Some people just can't get worked up enough. They can, but they stifle it and cut it off. This sensitivity to other people's emotions, to yours. Thurston, the great magician, before he went on, he used to jump up and down to get himself excited. So this is what we're talking about in acute sensitivity. Let's look at the next point. Open-mindedness. When one recognizes that as human beings, we can never have all the facts. And not having all the facts, just the omission of one fact can change everything. We'll give some examples of this later on. Remember this. One fact can change the outcome of everything. Also, all of us see the points that we're interested in on the basis of our own interests, our own sex, age, interests, education, so on and so forth. Next, we have to remember in our open-mindedness that no two things are ever absolutely identical. Although they may have the same name, although they may come from the same place, they're never absolutely identical. Next, change is constant. The open-minded person recognizes this. An example in Encyclopedia Britannica, 1948. It's interesting to note the statement is made that the only use for uranium is in making ceramic tile. Change is constant. Just one fact was overlooked here, and that is, you might say, Los Alamos. Now, in this whole transfer of information, notice that change is constant, and the new situation always proposes, if not actually ends up in a new action. This gentleman, we'll say, wasn't too interested in the problems of fertilization of his farm and so on and so forth. And then he read an article about how it increased the crop yield, and his wife also read that article and read that it meant a saving of $250. Yeah. The man didn't take this into consideration. His wife comes and says, look, if we'd fertilize that back part out in there, you know, I could afford, we might be able to save enough to afford that new deep freeze. New situation, new action. Watch these things happen in your own life as your children become aware of new possibilities and so forth. This is the concept then of open-mindedness. Experimental nature. The individual in the inner qualities that is continually juggling his ideas, the colors and the shapes and so on and so forth. You see this an awful lot in industry. For example, the Soup on the Rocks campaign that we currently have. The gentleman, I might point to this, the filling station operator who was having a hard time selling his brand of motor oil, continually juggling. He saw one day a magnet, and he thought, well, I'll put a pan of motor oil out there and a magnet up here, and I'll show these people how parts of the piston ring and so on and so forth drop off of the piston, and this magnet holds them. And of course, the curiosity of his customers asking what that was there and so on and so forth, he said, oh, that's the metal that drops down into your oil and so on and so forth and eats up your rings. So this is the juxtaposition idea. The great bank in New York City that their current series of ads is a grease pencil approach. There are many, many others in this juggling, reach beyond conformity. It's always interesting, I think, here to note that the feeling was when America was fighting the British in 1700s, that we didn't have a chance. But they overlooked a couple of very important facts. You see, the British wouldn't fight on Sunday. The British wouldn't get behind trees. The British wouldn't fight in the mud. And our men would. And these three facts made a tremendous difference, reaching beyond conformity. There are many, many other examples along this same line of people who are continually holding themselves open, doing the different thing. We say dare to be different and add in things that make a difference. Notice that Henry Ford's concept, if I'm not mistaken at this current moment, is that in future years you won't buy a new car and just own it outright like you do. You'll buy sort of a leasing policy. And you'll lease this car for 2 years, and this will enable you to turn in this old car, and you'll get a new one. A brand new car every year, every 2 years. And this old car will actually be just crumbled up, pushed together, and shoved aside. Daring to be different in things that make a difference, like Tony did in the cake mixes, and many other instances, Mr. Pfister in his farm, hybrid corn. Can't you just see him daring to be different? An interesting sidelight here again is the oil well director down in Texas, who thought, well, this exhaust gas that we just let run out of the diesel motor here, why don't we just pump this back down into the well? And they did, and it broke up a certain kind of shale. You have to dare to be different in things that make a difference if we're going to meet the many challenges that come up. Let's look at the next point, self-confidence. In the core, in the bottom of this creative individual, of the concept of inner qualities, we notice that it's extremely important that this person feel that the work he is doing is personally very, very valuable. We notice that this individual is consumed with his efforts. He isn't looking for something to fill his time. This thing that he's working with is important to him, to society, to his people, and so forth. Notice that this person has a tendency to associate with those people who believe in him. We'll say some more about that. And finally, that he draws encouragement from ideals, causes, and other people. Let's look at this personally valuable work. We'll go back to Mr. Pfister. Can you imagine a man taking 5,000 different kinds of seeds and so forth and planting them and crossbreeding them and so forth? This to him must have been tremendously valuable. Thomas Edison being consumed with his efforts as he was. Not a question of money or anything else. This was important. This was Mr. Edison in action. Some of the farmers that I've had the privilege of seeing today, for example, and some of the farm directors. Same thing, consumed with their efforts. Associates who believe in you. Notice the difference in this one word, believe. We're not saying agree with you, we're saying believe in you. If the person believes in you but disagrees, this reinforces your safety in a way, because you're not feeling that he's just agreeing with you for some reason that he can't come up with. He believes in you. Next, draw encouragement from ideals, causes, or other people. It's also an important point that one might bring out, that in Who's Who in America, you find these great men listed, and many of them say that their followers are Lincoln, or their authorities on Thomas Jefferson or something else. What are they saying? Well, any person that knows the life of Lincoln knows that that man failed by many social standards in everything that he tried. Everything. And he had to overcome those. If Mr. Lincoln had that kind of a problem, and many other people we come up against, certainly we can't give up so easily on the problems that we have. Next, let's look. We've talked about the individual now, the inner qualities of the individual. Let's look at the external atmosphere. This is the second quality. Remember, this is the area in which the person moves. He has to move in an area where human potential is recognized, where it is felt that this man can come up with the idea. Like Mr. Alex Lewitt of the Lewitt vacuum cleaner, his secretary gave him the idea for that vacuum cleaner. In the external atmosphere, you have to have a safe climate for creative behavior. You have to provide the type of encouragement and feeling that this man can be different and not be penalized. This doesn't mean cloud nine or running the complete rampant society. We're talking about some time when he can experiment. If he has an acreage of 180 acres, take off 40 or 30 to experiment with. An atmosphere in which external evaluations are minimized. By this we mean, let me give you an example here. In South Bend, Indiana is a firm known as the City Pattern Works, and they make castings. One of the companies that they serve is in Cedar Rapids, and they make radio towers. This company had a problem that they made the tower in Boston. This tower was blown down. They had to have a casting that would keep this tower up. They went to the foreman, and they said, "Can you build one of 100 thousandths tolerance?" He said no. He tried it. They sent it up. Didn't work. They said, "By the way, what was that for?" "For the tower in Boston." "Oh, let me tell that to our foreman." They did. And when he said, "Oh, this was a new kind of a challenge." See, the external evaluation was removed. So we have, finally here, the external atmosphere of the individual. This is extremely important. The third factor is general social environment. These are the things over which we do not have much control, because our cultural needs produce ideas, so much so that there is a concept that it isn't the man that's important, it's society. As documentation, we show you that the camera was invented by 3 people in 1839, the photograph, 4 people in 1877, and so forth. In social environment, we have a scientific heritage. You don't just get an automobile, you get a spark plug in, we'll say, 1860, and a flywheel in 1887, and gears in 1840, and then you get an automobile in, we'll say, 1895. We need a talent reservoir. That's why the appeal is to you and you directly. You are that talent. You can give America that creativity. And finally, public desire, a felt need. We know, for example, that an automobile would be built better if it had the motor in the back. Now, all of this means this, that whenever your idea isn't accepted, what does it mean? It means that society isn't quite ready for it, but don't give up. Keep trying.